From camp counselor to a director for Health Canada, Etienne's passion for camp hasn't wavered. If anything, it's grown stronger. A moment at a staff meeting percolated in his head until years later when the light bulb moment struck and changed the way he saw the world forever. The passion that Etienne has for how important camp leadership skills are beyond camp is contagious, so grab a cup of coffee and listen in. Welcome to Beyond Camp, where we explore the intersection of camp in our lives. For too long, camp professionals have referred to being in a bubble, and we're here to burst that bubble with you today. We know that camp intersects with every aspect of our lives. We're excited to delve into those. We're your hosts, Rachel Kent. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Cassie Bloy. My pronouns are also she, her.
We're here to go beyond camp with you. As a reminder, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening today. And be sure to check out the show notes at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp. Now, let's get started. We're thrilled today to be welcoming our guest, Etienne Lefebvre, who first attended Glenmore Camp in Ontario at the age of 8. Etienne continued going to camp and worked as a counselor for one summer at Glenmore and another summer in his hometown. And nowadays, Etienne is the director of IT operations for Health Canada, the editor for the Camp Code podcast, keeping those camp connections strong. And most recently, he completed a Master's of Arts in Leadership, an accomplishment that he attributes a lot to his influence of his days at camp, which we are so excited to dive into. So Etienne, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Etienne, we've only spoken a few times, but it's already very clear how passionate you are about camp. And so we're really excited for you to share that with our listeners, because it seems like you're a really strong believer that those moments during your childhood and those young adult years can really influence your life down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I think the first thing that I would say is I should introduce myself. So my pronouns are he, him, and my daughter. I have two kids. My daughter calls me dad, and my son is a year old. He continues to call me mom. So there you go.
Love that.
But I think camp is such a magical place, and I'm just excited to be part of this conversation. And we need to continue to talk about camp and the importance of camp in the future generation for their lives and what it can do for us as we continue to grow.
Absolutely. So we'll start off how we start all our podcasts. Can you share with us how you identify? You shared a little bit of that, but if you are willing to go further, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a father of two. I think in my professional life, I am a director, so I have a lot of people that look up to me for direction, which I think is crazy and insane. But that tends to be what I do. And then on the side, play some hockey. I like to run, so I try to consider myself a little bit athletic. But in the evenings, you'll see me playing a couple video games once the kids are in bed, and try to relax a little bit. That's a bit about me.
Nice. Do you have a video game of choice?
So sure. So I've been playing like a lot of Call of Duty, too much Call of Duty, and it's fun. I've never had people that I consider friends that I play online with, but I play with a certain squad with the same group of people. And actually, one of them's out in BC as well, out in near Delta, BC. So it's really interesting to see the time zones there too, because it's near bedtime for me, and they're just starting. But
Nice.
my nerd side.
That's awesome.
That's so great. I love that. Like, I feel like there's like that moment of like where certain things have progressed during the pandemic, and that it's just like we have so many more connections that we're willing to maintain because of it, even with like a more global reach. But we need to like stay on track here as well. So along with identity, we also love to talk about privilege, and curious about if you think about your privilege and where you carry privilege with you in your life.
That's such a great question. I find myself extremely fortunate for the experiences that I've had throughout my life growing up. I was fortunate enough and privileged to go to camp every summer since I was 8 years old, and then had the opportunities to work at camp. And then afterwards, look at education, going to post-secondary school, and now I'm in my 30s and having the opportunity to actually go back to school again and do a master's while working, while being a father to two kids. Like, I consider myself fortunate, and privilege is a great word that describes how I feel my lifestyle has turned into, or my life has turned into, with support from my family. And it's such a it's such a magical thing that when I look back at it, you know, there are nights that I sit on the couch with my partner and like ask myself, like, how do we get here? How do we do all this? And that's, it's such a, you know, I can only dream that I can help my kids be as privileged as I was. And then you look at all the dark side of the world of inflation and everything else. You're like, I don't know if I'm gonna do it. But no, that's it. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for sharing and taking that little moment to kind of really reflect on it. It's so valuable. And you mentioned camp there and like the opportunity to go to camp. But did your time to like dive into that, because you've recently pursued your master's in leadership, did your time at camp influence your decision to go that route and to further your knowledge in leadership?
100%, 1,000%. Camp to me, when I was a child, was where magic happened. It's where I got to pretend to play in the medieval times, or, you know, capture the flag, or whatever it is we were doing on the water. But as I got older, you start to realize the learnings you learn at camp are with you for life. And, you know, while I was growing up, I took part of Scouts Canada. So I was very much outdoorsy, but I liked my time in Scouts Canada, but I found that the delivery that camp did for me as a human being has stuck with me since day one. So since, you know, right before this we started recording today, I mentioned how I did a summer working at camp and then went back to my part-time job afterwards and found that job really easy. And I think that attributes to the skill sets and the values that you learn about camp, you know, that you have to be hardworking, or you should be hardworking, and that you work towards a set of goals. And then the connections that you make with individuals are for life. And so I think the biggest thing that I took from camp, and I didn't realize it until about 5 years ago, is that the way that you treat people should be exactly that. Every single person is a human being, and you need to treat these individuals that you work with, that you engage with, that you're friends with, that you're family with, as human beings. And so that, to me, going into my education, I knew that I wanted to do something. My education was actually a bit limiting me in my career, because I had a college diploma, and I knew I wanted to do something. And I come from computer engineering technology, and I knew I did not want to pursue my master's in computer science. I knew that. I did not want to do more computer stuff. I actually considered leaving IT completely and going into something around diversity and inclusion, more focusing on the human aspect. And I didn't know how to get there. So I said, okay, well, go back to school, start with that. And so throughout the philosophy, the schooling I did, leadership comes down to a bunch of different theories around leadership. And one of them is called servanthood leadership. And essentially it just means to serve others. And I didn't realize that I followed that. And I didn't realize it for the first 12 months taking this program. And then I was meeting with a prof, and it was actually, the conversation was about empathy. And I started talking about camp and how camp has done so much for me that I feel like I need to continue doing things for camp. I need to find ways, you know, it's part of the reason why I do the camp code editing is because it's my way of giving back. And they identified right there, you're serving others, you're serving. And then I dove into servanthood leadership and realized that all comes back to camp. That all comes back to, like, you know, there's the CIT program, or the leadership and training, whatever your camp calls it. But before that, you do, like, as a teenager and even as a youth going into those teen programs, camp starts to teach you about looking after other people, about how to help people, you know. And I'm going to quote Beth Allison from Camp Code, who I call Topaz, but she talks about the 4 S's, right? Stewardship, is it safe, stewardship, self-esteem, and servant. And I've taken those 4 S's and, like, applied it to my job and my career and my life. And so I think, like, at my core, camp was a huge influence for me to go back to school. And now I've been able to mold my education and my experiences at camp into my job and actually apply actual actual fact-based research towards the way that I present myself in my role.
There's so much there, and I love there's so many little things. I was like, oh, this, and then you'd keep going, and I was like, oh, I had a follow up, and then it didn't need to happen because you just answered my question for me. But for those of you who are listening in, we'll put a copy of Beth's 4S test in our show notes for you as well. But I know Rachel also is ready to dive in.
Yeah, I feel very passionately about servant leadership. I think it's really important in the world, and sometimes it has a negative connotation for a variety of reasons, and we won't unpack all of those right now. But I do think that it's a huge part of being at camp, and it's just built into how you operate at camp. Like kids see somebody else, and they're like, "Oh, can I help you do up your life jacket? Can I help you tie your shoes?" Older kids with younger kids with each other, and it's valued there, and it's seen as a sign of strength. And the folks that people look up to are the ones who are acting in that way all the time. So it's not seen as a sign of weakness or being strange. So it is a beautiful thing, and it sort of links into my question. I was going to say, how's camp shaped your leadership style? And I wonder if you can speak about, when you're leading in sort of the more corporate environment, how does camp shape the way that you lead there?
Yeah, so I stepped into this role in the new organization at Health Canada at the end of September, and the first thing I did was I wanted to meet with every single person that reports through my teams in one way or another. And to do that for me, that was one-on-one. So I met with every individual, and to me, right away, that was the first step. I have 110 people that report through me, and we did a half hour each. So
Wow.
so that talks to the time. But to me, I have a spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets. I wrote notes on every single conversation, and I've gone back to those notes dozens of times over that or since I've been there, and I've used those conversations to help shape the direction that we go as an organization. And so I heard stories from individuals that they were a student in the organization, and they weren't able to get full-time employment in the organization afterwards for whatever reason. And then the pandemic hit, and Health Canada and the Public Health Agency shifted very quickly, where we relied on folks to continue doing our work in IT. So I decided that my first year is going to be focused on surfing those and trying to find ways to fix. I say they're the mistakes. It's not that they're mistakes, it's that the organization was going one direction, and then the pandemic flipped everything upside down. And now we have to mold ourselves and go a different way. And so what I'm trying to do is, the individuals that were students, well, we should hire those people because we invested into them for 3 years as students, and then we've given them short-term contracts. Well, I need these people to be employees because they bring value to the organization. And then there was a couple instances like that I think is the first step of listening to people, understanding. In the government of Canada, bilingualism is a huge thing. If you're bilingual, it's going to open doors for you. You're going to get different opportunities. So right away, find out who wants to go on language training, who wants to learn a second language, and then how do we accommodate that? How do I make that work? And so that's the kind of stuff that right away was finding ways that to them, to individuals that I work with, is huge. But for myself, it's a signature. It's a signing off on a document. It's taking a little bit of training money for that individual and investing into the humans. And there's these memes that you see on the internet where, like, if we invest into our employees, they're going to go. And it's like, well, what happens if you don't invest into them? And like, I think coming into this job, I saw what happens. People get frustrated. Everyone's fighting burnout throughout the pandemic. And in IT, it's very much the same. And now that, fingers crossed, we're getting through this, that we need to step up and invest into our individuals and recognize them for the work that they did and led us through the 24 months of chaos that we've all lived.
Yeah, and recognition is such a big thing at camp as well. And I think we in the camp world, we're so keen to invest in our staff runners. Like, of course, we'll get you. Like, you want to be high rope certified, you want to learn to sail, like, of course. And to be honest, it never really crossed my mind that I would pay for somebody to learn to sail and then like they would leave and go to another camp next summer. Or if they did, maybe it was because there was like better growth out there for them and that's what I wanted for them. And so I think there's a lot of that that can translate over into other parts of the world. We are going to take a quick break here and then we're going to dive right back in with Etienne about camp leadership skills in the quote unquote real world. We'll be right back.
At the American Camp Association of Illinois, our work is driven by our passion and aim to make the world a better place. And we do that by using camp as a tool of transformation. Our accreditation program is renowned nationally for its distinct peer review experience, which coaches local camps and agencies in running safe, quality programs that change lives. To learn more about the accreditation program, including the unlimited benefits of participating, head to acail.org.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. So as promised, we're going to dive into camp leadership skills and the real world, because I think so often folks think that the skills that you learn at camp just aren't applicable in the real world. Like, sure, you can lead a repeat after me song for 200 people at the same time at the beach, but how does that apply to the boardroom? But there's so much more to it than just that. So what would you say, Etienne, to someone who doesn't think that camp leadership skills are applicable in the quote unquote real world?
I think I would say you're wrong. No, I would start with that. And just go back to the fundamentals of what you learn at camp. And you mentioned it earlier, helping someone do up their life jacket or helping someone do up their shoe. In the corporate world, maybe that's a phone call to a colleague or to someone you work with to say, hey, what can I do for you? Are you doing okay? Is everything all right? More significantly, in the virtual world that we've adapted to, gone are the days of I call them the water cooler chats, where you just chat around a water cooler. And so it's not as easy to do up that individual's life jacket or tie up their shoe, because you don't know if something is bothering them. And so I think the first thing is communicate. Communication is the biggest thing that I see, that when there's a breakdown of communication and describing, your direction or even myself, like, hey folks, there's some days that I go into the meeting, hey folks, there's a lot on my plate today. I might seem a little harsh. It's just because I have a lot of things processing. And I think that is something that I learned at camp is, hang on to or not hang on. It's okay to show your emotions. It's okay to talk about, I'm frustrated today. Use those active words that we're taught as children. I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm happy. And because people can see it, right? And so and in the virtual world, I'm very much a camera on person, because there's no body language that I want to be able to show. If people can see my face and see my tone, they can see more about me. And I think that right away in the tone of my voice and in the conversation, the context of the conversation, people can pick up that something's wrong. They won't know what is wrong. So it's about describing. The biggest thing for me is, even as growing up as a child and as a leader applying it to work, is talk about how you're feeling. Like, I don't know how to explain it other than that. It's emotions. It's emotions. It's about demonstrating how you're feeling, what you're doing, what is bothering you today, what is working today. And that's usually how I start my conversations. And that's a good way to frame the context of how I'm coming from, so that people can understand, try to take in my point of view, understand my perspective, just like I try to do with them. I check in with folks that I work with and say, how are you doing? How are you doing is such a powerful word. It's such a powerful phrase to say, because it makes people explore their thoughts, their feelings, especially in a virtual world, especially.
Absolutely. And I think that the power of the question, how you're doing, is also found in the silence that follows. So it's the making time for that, because I know I've interacted with some folks that are like, how are you doing? And then they're like on to the agenda items. And then there's other folks that I interact with who are like, how are you doing? And then there's a pause and there's actually like time for that listening and that response, which is so important. And we're used to that at camp, because I think camp time is often one of the greatest tools and gifts that we have when we're there. And sometimes it's lacking in the virtual world or just in the corporate world in general, but we can find our way back to that. I really like what you said there about the importance of expressing emotions, because I think that ability to share when it comes from a leader then sets the tone for everybody else, and also recognizing folks, especially during the pandemic, as being human beings that are multifaceted and don't just exist at work. it used to be a lot easier to say, well, I work from 9 to 5 and then I go home, and I like, home is very separate from work, but now we're all sitting in our homes right now. It would appear like they're so connected that it's no longer as easy as saying like what's happening in your life doesn't affect your work anymore. And it sounds like you do an excellent job of sort of merging those. And I think especially at overnight camp, you're so aware of that, because the emotions of the argument that was had between co-counselors the night before at 2 a.m. because something was happening is very much going to affect their programming at 9 a.m. the next day in a way that it doesn't happen at the office, because hopefully you're not seeing your coworkers at 2 a.m. and 9 a.m. Cassie, I'll pass it over to you to continue on.
Yeah, sure. I'm just taking a moment from like, please don't ever see your coworkers at 2 a.m. I feel like that would be not a good situation. But anyways, Etienne, can you pinpoint a specific time at camp when you look back at it that was really pivotal in your career path right now?
Yes. I have.
Oh.
So when I worked at Glenmore that summer, every Sunday was dedicated to before the campers arrived, right? We all sat in a circle and we all went through the week. I actually worked there the last year that I think it was last year that the Beth Allison worked there. Nonetheless, it was such an important session because we got to listen and learn about the week that was coming up. And actually the one meeting that sticks in my brain is when Teen Week was coming. And we talked about bullying, and we talked about generally when boys bully, it's physical, and when girls bully, it's in that context it was not physical, it was like mind games. I can't think of the word right now. And that was a long time ago when we were talking about boys do this, girls do that, and obviously that's not the way we look at the world today. But in that moment, made me realize that I had never considered the mental state of others. I'd never considered what I say or what I do, how it'll make them feel. And I remember sitting on the floor and being like, oh, I never thought of that. And so now, and we did this crazy thing at camp where I remember that on the Sunday, we'd go put paper up on all the mirrors to make sure that, for the teens, that you would put signs that say like, you look fabulous, you look great. And I didn't realize what that does for the human beings. And it's that mental side of things of everything's okay, everything's all right. And then the positive reinforcement that we can use with our words actually go a long way. So I talk about it in two ways. There's extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation in the corporate world is I get a bonus, I get something, I get a gift card. And intrinsic is it made me feel good. It made me feel good to do this. And so what we did in that circle, and by putting up those paper on the mirrors and writing positive words, made us as human beings feel good about the job that we were doing, because we're trying to reinforce a positive atmosphere for the campers as they arrive. And so I try to do the exact same thing. Now, I know everyone's not intrinsically motivated, but finding ways to reinforce that someone is doing a good job, or that someone is contributing positively to the organization, goes a long way. Just it goes back to appreciation, right? It goes back to that little piece of thank you. And I remember sitting in that circle, and I remember listening to the folks talk about bullying, boys versus girls, and then we did the mirror thing, and I didn't see how it all went together. And then years later, I was like, no way. I think I was sitting in a lecture, and I was like, no way, that's why we did that. That's why we put up those signs. And so now I think for me in the corporate world, it start to break down those barriers of like, oh, I'm the director, I can't talk to people over here. And people are so astonished that I reach out to them and say, hey, like, I heard you did this, just want to like say thank you so much. It really, really helped us. And that's something that I took away from camp. That's something that I learned sitting there before teen week started. And it was valuable. It was good.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that motivation that people experience externally, especially with today's younger generation, is so powerful, and just has so much value to them. It's one of the things I strive to accomplish on a day-to-day as well with my teams.
I love how something that I think sometimes as directors we overlook or we think is simple, like those like meetings that you have every week. And I know I've certainly showed up with them and be like, all right, like, okay, I got my papers ready, the schedule's ready to hand out. What do I need to share? And okay, I should say something like motivational. And it's not, I like to think I always put more thought into it, but there were definitely some where I was like, all right, I got another cup of coffee. Like we have to get through this, time is ticking. And that's such a great reminder of like the power of those moments. And that moments that seem simple or don't seem like they're going to be as impactful as that campfire that you planned out for 4 days beforehand, you know, with the magical lighting and the tiki torches and all of that, can be just as powerful. And that moments can be powerful later on as well. That's a wonderful lesson to take away from that, that some things can stick with us and just sort of percolate over the years. And then one day you're like, aha, that was it. And obviously that was taught by Beth Allison because she's wonderful and we could all learn from her words of wisdom. Cassie and I are big Beth Allison fans, a big Women in Camp fans. So, Etienne, what advice would you give to folks who are looking to highlight their camp experience on their resume for a non-camp job? So they've realized that their time to look for something else is upon them. How can they highlight that and really speak to that experience?
I think it really comes down to, you know, I guess on a resume, it's a little bit more challenging, right? Because you're stuck to that piece of paper that you're supposed to have. I would say highlighting that no matter what role you're in working at camp, you're in a leadership role because you have children looking up to you. You have children, you have parents who have given you their kids for a week or even at the day, if it's a day camp, that they're trusting you. And so right away highlighting that you're in a leadership role at a summer camp. And then at the interview process, when you get that interview, you talk about that. You talk about how leading children, what that does for you as a human being. You know, when we apply to jobs, you're effectively trying to sell yourself, right, to an employer. That's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to get a step above anyone else. And what I would say that the majority of employers, or I guess all employers, have in common is that at some point we were all children, or we all, you know, we are definitely all children at some point. There's a good chance that people have children, and that people are going to listen to that. People are going to understand how did you work with these children? How did you lead these children? And what did you do to influence these children and create their magic camp? It's something that I've spoken about at job interviews. Even now in my senior role in the department, I talk about that, and people look at me like, dude, that was like 20 years ago for you now. Like, okay, stop counting. Yes, but it still has an influence on me. It still is what's driving me today. So why wouldn't I talk about that? Why wouldn't I advocate for that? And I think that's just a selling point that you need to just go back and refer to those magical moments at camp and talk about what you did for those children to positively influence their lives.
Just gonna let us sit with everything because I feel like there's just a lot going on and like just so much joy, I think, as well, that's just being shared from your experiences. And it lets us know that you've very much stayed connected to camp in one way or another. Why?
Wow, that's a why. You know, going back to thinking about, like, I have so much gratitude for camp. I think that camp is what built me and transformed me into what I am today. Like, my daughter is not even 4 years old, and she can sing There's a Great Big Moose. She can sing these songs because I still do that with her. And so she knows all these camp songs, and she's 4 going on 30, but she's 4. And I think that camp brought so much joy in my life. And I'm pretty sure when I first started dating my wife, she thought I was crazy because I'd just be dancing or singing like It's a Happy Day, or random songs at camp. She's like, where do you get these? And I think it's made me happy. I think it's actually contributes to one reason why I'm happy today is because I had all these experiences at camp, and now I get to apply things that I learned at camp throughout my life and take those, now that I have kids too of my own, take those learnings from camp and actually teach them to my children. To me, is so rewarding. So I find this need to give back to camp in whatever ways I can, because camp has done so much for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're all sitting here going, yeah.
Your passion is just so clearly communicated for this, and it's
Mhm.
wonderful, and we so appreciate you sharing that passion with us.
Yeah, it's been so phenomenal. Etienne, we are so grateful for you joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure to listen to your story and for you to hear your passion and have it just come straight through the screen to us. And I think it really speaks to the value of camp after you've left camp. Even though you've stayed connected, I think that value still exists, and there's still space for those people out there looking to move beyond camp. No pun intended. Just rolls off the tongue sometimes, to just take it with them and kind of go and remember those stories and those learnings and continue to share them, whether that's in the workplace or just at home with your families and your friends as well. But before we wrap up, how can our guests connect with you if they have questions or just feel like they should connect with you?
I say the easiest way to find me is actually working in the corporate world. Is probably on LinkedIn. I'm there on LinkedIn, and I tend to post random things about leadership. I'll post obviously things for our roles in government, but that's definitely the easiest way.
Perfect. We can find that then and get that to our guests in our show notes, or our listeners in our show notes, not our guests. You're our guest. As we can see, my brain's firing all of a sudden really well today. So thank you everyone for joining us here at Beyond Camp. We hope that you were able to connect and reflect with us as we journey beyond the property lines and bring camp with us. As we wrap up, we want you to be able to reach out and connect with us, myself and Rachel, so you can email us at beyondcamp@gocamp.pro. I think you can also find us on LinkedIn. Maybe we'll just do a reshare of LinkedIn in there as well. Please remember to check out our show notes at gocamp.pro/beyondcamp. One last big round of thank yous again to Etienne for joining us today and making time to share his story with us. To the team at Go Camp Pro for holding space for our conversations, to ACA Illinois for their sponsorship and continued support, to our producers, Matt and Jotham, for dealing with our little technical glitches every week and making sure that when I cough, things don't go bad. And to you, our listeners, for making time to listen. Your dedication allows us to keep moving forward. Beyond Camp is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. Go well and safely, friends. We'll see you next time.